The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock, Avery's wife Lyla's elegant handwriting spelling out, "Family Gathering," in perfect cursive. Something about those two words made my hands tremble as I stood before my bedroom mirror, adjusting the pearl necklace Silas had given me on our 40th anniversary. "You're being silly, Cora," I whispered to my reflection, smoothing down my navy dress. But 35 years of motherhood had taught me to trust my instincts, and right now, they were screaming. The drive to Avery and Lyla's new house was short, barely 10 minutes through our sleepy Tennessee town. Silas had been unusually quiet the whole way, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. When I reached over to pat his hand, he flinched. "Everything all right, dear?" "Fine," he said too quickly. "Just thinking about work." The house was a Victorian masterpiece, far grander than anything a high school teacher and accountant should afford. As we walked up the wraparound porch, my grandson Finn burst through the front door, nearly tackling me with a hug. "Grandma, come see my new room." He tugged at my hand, but Lyla appeared in the doorway, her smile tight. "Later, seen. The adults need to talk first." The living room was a showcase of expensive furniture that still smelled of department store plastic. Avery paced near the fireplace, while Lyla perched on the edge of an armchair like a bird ready to take flight. Silas settled into the corner of the sofa, leaving space between us that felt like miles. "Mom," Avery started, then stopped, looking at Lyla for help. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Would anyone like coffee?" Lyla stood abruptly. "I just bought this wonderful French press." "What's going on?" I interrupted, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Before anyone could answer, small footsteps thundered down the stairs. Finn appeared in the doorway, his face flushed. "Grandma, I heard Dad and Mom talking last night. They're going to—" "Finn." Lila's voice cracked like a whip. "Go to your room. Now." But Finn stood his ground, his bottom lip trembling. "They're going to send you away. To that place where old people go." I heard them. The room went silent. I could hear the antique clock on the mantel ticking away seconds that suddenly felt precious. Silas wouldn't look at me. Avery had stopped pacing, his face ash-white. "A nursing home?" The words felt foreign on my tongue. "I'm 62 years old. I still tend my own garden. I volunteer at the library 3 days a week." "Mom, it's not like that," Avery started, but I held up my hand. "Then what is it like?" I looked at each of them in turn. My son who couldn't meet my eyes, my daughter-in-law studying her manicure, my husband of 43 years suddenly fascinated by the pattern in the carpet. Finn slipped his small hand into mine. "I don't want you to go, Grandma." "Nobody's going anywhere right now," I said, squeezing his hand. But as I looked around this room full of secrets and lies, at this family I thought I knew, something shifted inside me. The fear and confusion crystallized into something harder, sharper. "Finn, would you like to show me that new room of yours?" He nodded eagerly, pulling me toward the stairs. As we left, I caught a glimpse of Silas reaching for his phone, his hands shaking. Whatever was really happening here, whatever had driven my family to this moment, I would find out. And God help them when I did. Finn's bedroom window overlooked the park where he used to play t-ball. I watched him fidget with a model airplane, his small fingers tracing the wings as he spoke. "Dad was yelling really loud last night. He said Grandpa lost all the money, and they have to sell your house." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Lost all the money? What money, sweetheart?" "I don't know. But Mom said something about retirement and investments." He set down the airplane. Then they talked about the nursing home. Dad didn't want to, but Mom said there wasn't any choice. A knock at the door made us both jump. "Mom," Avery's voice. "We should finish our discussion." "Just a minute," I called, but my voice cracked. Finn grabbed my hand. "We can go to the park," he whispered. "Through the back stairs. I do it all the time when Mom's mad." I shouldn't have done it. Proper grandmothers don't sneak out of houses with 9-year-olds. But proper husbands don't plot to send their wives away either. 5 minutes later, we were crossing the street to the park. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty playground, and the spring air carried the scent of blooming dogwoods. Tell me everything you heard, Finn. Every detail. He pumped his legs on the swing while he talked. Grandpa came over really late. He was crying, Grandma. I've never seen him cry before. My stomach twisted. In 43 years of marriage, I'd seen Silas cry exactly twice, when Avery was born and when his mother died. He kept saying he was sorry, that he didn't mean for it to happen. Mom got really mad and said he'd ruined everything. Finn's swing slowed. Then they talked about selling your house to pay something called creditors. My house. The one I'd spent decades turning into a home, where I'd raised my son and tended my garden, where every wall held memories of a life I thought was secure. Dad said there had to be another way, but Mom said the nursing home was the only option that made financial sense. Finn jumped off the swing. What does that mean, Grandma? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from Silas, 2 from Avery, a text from Lyla. Please come back. We can explain everything. It means, sweetheart, that your grandmother needs to make some changes. I pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo. But I want you to know something. No matter what happens, I will always be here for you. Always. Promise. Cross my heart. We walked to the baseball diamond where dandelions pushed through cracks in the dirt. Finn picked one, its yellow head bobbing in the breeze. Mom says you're getting forgetful, he said quietly. That's why you need to go away. But I don't think you're forgetful at all. I thought about my morning routine. Coffee at 6, crossword puzzle by 7, volunteer work 3 days a week. The garden I maintained without help, the books I discussed at my weekly reading group, the investments I'd tracked for years while Silas insisted on handling everything himself. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Silas. Please come home. I can fix this. Fix this. Like I was a problem to be solved, a burden to be managed. Rage bubbled up, foreign and fierce. Finn, would you like to get ice cream? I think we both could use some before we go back. He grinned, gap-toothed and beautiful. Can I get sprinkles? You can get anything you want. I took his hand, my mind already racing ahead. They thought they had it all figured out, my family with their secret plans and whispered conversations. But they'd forgotten something important. They'd forgotten who I was before I was anyone's wife, anyone's mother, anyone's grandmother. And it was time to remind them. After dropping Finn back at the house, I drove straight to Marlene's. She opened her door before I could knock, still wearing her gardening apron despite the setting sun. I saw your car pull up, she said, studying my face. You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse. I've seen the truth. I followed her into her kitchen, where herbs dried in bunches from the ceiling. The familiar scent of rosemary and sage couldn't calm my shaking hands. Marlene poured 2 glasses of wine without asking. Start from the beginning. I told her everything, the housewarming party, Finn's revelation, the whispered plans for my future. When I mentioned Silas's financial troubles, she set her glass down hard enough to slosh wine onto her worn tablecloth. That explains the foreclosure notice, she said quietly. What foreclosure notice? On the Miller property. The one Silas was developing through his investment company. She hesitated. Cora, there's something you should know. I've been hearing things at the bank where I volunteer. My stomach clenched. What things? Your husband's name keeps coming up in conversations. Something about mismanaged funds, properties underwater. She reached for my hand. And there's talk about retirement accounts being emptied. The room tilted sideways. My retirement account. And others. The rumor is he was using them to cover losses on bad investments. She squeezed my fingers. When did you last check your statements? I hadn't. Silas handled all our finances. He'd insisted on it for 43 years, calling it his responsibility as a husband. I'd trusted him completely. There's more, Marlene said. That beautiful house your son just bought? The deed's in Silas's name. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The mysterious house purchase. The sudden concern about my mental state. The nursing home plans. They're trying to protect their assets, I whispered, by declaring me incompetent before everything comes crashing down. The nursing home would be state-funded, Marlene confirmed. And if you're declared mentally incompetent before any financial wrongdoing comes to light, then I can't testify against my own husband." The words tasted like ash. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Silas. "Please come home. I need to explain." "Don't go," Marlene said sharply. "Not until we figure this out." I stood, my legs steadier than I expected. "I need to see something first." 20 minutes later, I sat in my home office, staring at my computer screen. It had taken 3 tries to guess Silas's password, our anniversary date, then Avery's birthday, finally settling on his mother's maiden name. The financial records spread before me like a map of betrayal. Empty retirement accounts, mortgages I'd never signed, investment losses that made my head spin. And there, buried in a folder marked Family Trust, documents preparing for my psychological evaluation. The front door opened downstairs. Silas's heavy footsteps crossed the foyer. "Cora, are you home?" I clicked through another document, this one showing transfers to Avery and Lyla's account, money that should have been our retirement, now funding their new life, while plans were made to discard me. "Cora, closer now." The stairs creaked. I opened one final file, papers for power of attorney, already drafted, waiting only for a doctor's declaration of my incompetence. My hands stopped shaking. The office door opened behind me. "There you are. I've been worried sick." "Have you, Silas?" I turned to face my husband, seeing him clearly for the first time in 43 years. "Or have you just been worried I'd find out?" His face went pale as he saw the computer screen. "I can explain everything." "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "You will." Silas slumped into my office chair, the leather creaking beneath him. In the fading light, he looked older than his 64 years, his shoulders curved under an invisible weight. "It started with small investments," he said, "properties that seemed guaranteed to turn a profit. But then the market shifted, and I had to cover the losses." "With my retirement fund?" My voice stayed steady, though my fingernails dug half-moons into my palms. "I was going to pay it back. I had a plan." He reached for my hand, but I stepped away. "The Miller development was supposed to fix everything. And when that failed, you decided to fix me instead?" I gestured at the power of attorney documents on the screen. "Have me declared incompetent?" "That was Lila's idea." The words tumbled out. "She said it was the only way to protect what's left. If you're declared incompetent before the creditors come, before they discover you've committed fraud." The family photos on my desk caught my eye, vacation snapshots, Christmas mornings, moments I'd thought were real. "And Avery agreed to this?" "He didn't want to, but the house." Silas wiped his face. "I put it in my name to protect him. If everything falls apart, at least they'll have somewhere to live." A knock at the front door echoed through the house. Silas jerked upright. "That'll be Dr. Patterson," he said. "I called him when I couldn't find you. He's here to do an evaluation." "You actually called him?" The reality of their plan hit me full force. "You were really going to do this tonight? We don't have much time. The bank is asking questions." Another knock, more insistent. Silas stood, reaching for my arm. "Please, Cora, just talk to him. Make this easier for everyone." I yanked away, my wedding ring catching the last sunlight through the window. 43 years of marriage flashed through my mind. The young man who'd promised to cherish me, the father who'd taught our son to ride a bike, the husband who'd held my hand through my mother's funeral. Easier? I pulled the ring off my finger. It felt lighter than I remembered. "Like this?" The ring clinked against his chest as I tossed it, bouncing once before rolling under the desk. Silas stared at me, mouth open. "Cora, don't." "Mrs. Whitfield." A man's voice called from downstairs. "I'm Dr. Patterson. Your husband asked me to stop by." I grabbed my purse and car keys. "If you try to have me declared incompetent, I'll tell the authorities everything. About the fraud, the missing money, all of it." "You'd send me to prison?" His voice cracked. "After everything we've been through?" The footsteps on the stairs grew closer. I thought of Finn in his new room, playing with his model airplane, innocently revealing the plot against his grandmother. I thought of Avery and Lyla and their beautiful house, built on stolen dreams. You should have thought of that before you decided to throw me away. I slipped past him and down the hall, my shoes silent on the carpet. The back stairs would take me to the kitchen door, the same escape route Finn had shown me earlier. Behind me, I heard Silas greeting the doctor, making excuses about my whereabouts. Let them search. Let them worry. Let them wonder what else I might know, what else I might do. As I drove away, my bare finger throbbing where my ring used to be, I realized something. Betrayal doesn't break you all at once. It happens slowly, then suddenly, like ice cracking beneath your feet. And I was done trying to keep my head above water for people who'd rather watch me drown. Marlene's guest room felt like a shelter in a storm, but I couldn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, I sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through dozens of missed calls and messages. Avery's latest text made my hands shake. Mom, please don't do anything rash. We can work this out as a family. Family. The word had lost its meaning somewhere between fraud and betrayal. Can't sleep either? Marlene appeared in her robe, clutching 2 mugs of chamomile tea. I heard you pacing. I found something else, I said, sliding my phone across the table. Look at the date on this email. She squinted at the screen, then drew in a sharp breath. 3 months ago? They've been planning this since before Avery and Lyla bought the house. The tea scalded my throat. They used my retirement money for their down payment, knowing they'd need to get rid of me before I found out. A car's headlights swept across the kitchen windows. We both froze. That's the 3rd time tonight, Marlene whispered. Same car. Silas probably hired someone to watch for me. I laughed, but it came out hollow. He always said private investigators were cheaper than lawyers. You need a lawyer, Cora. A good one. I need my life back. I twisted my bare ring finger, the skin still marked after 43 years. But first, I need to get to the bank before Silas can empty any more accounts. Dawn found me in the parking lot of First Tennessee Bank, waiting for the doors to open. My phone buzzed, Lyla this time. Finn's asking for you, she said without preamble. He won't go to school until he talks to you. Put him on. Not until you promise not to fill his head with. Either put my grandson on the phone, or hang up Lyla. Those are your options. A pause, then Finn's voice. Grandma? Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just taking care of some things. Dad's really mad at Grandpa. I heard them fighting last night. His voice dropped to a whisper. Mom says you're sick, but I told her you're not. I told her you're the smartest person I know. Tears burned my eyes. Thank you, Finn. That means everything to me. When are you coming home? Before I could answer, the line went dead. Lila's number was already blocked when I tried to call back. The bank manager's office felt too small, too warm. She reviewed my accounts with practiced neutrality, but I saw the moment she noticed the irregularities. Mrs. Whitfield, these transactions. She turned the monitor, so I could see. They're quite concerning. Would you like me to contact the authorities? I stared at the numbers, each one a betrayal in digital form. Not yet, but I need to make some changes first. By noon, I had opened new accounts in my name only, transferred what little remained of my personal savings, and filed fraud reports on the unauthorized transactions. As I left the bank, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mom, it's Avery. Please don't do this. Dad's talking about hurting himself. My finger hovered over the reply button. Then I remembered the power of attorney papers already filled out. The doctor they'd brought to declare me incompetent. The house they'd bought with my stolen future. I deleted the message. Back at Marlene's, I found a manila envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a copy of my marriage license, with a post-it note in Silas's handwriting. Remember who we were. Please come home. I let the paper fall into Marlene's recycling bin. Who we were died the moment they decided who I should become. Tomorrow, I'd see a lawyer. Tonight, I'd plan my revenge. The lawyer's conference room felt like a courtroom, with my family arranged on one side of the mahogany table and me on the other. Silas wouldn't meet my eyes. Avery kept checking his phone. Only Lyla stared directly at me, her expression carved from stone. "Before we begin," my lawyer said, "Mrs. Whitfield has some documents to share." I slid copies across the table, bank statements, transfer records, forged signatures. Each paper landed like an accusation. "Mom," Avery's voice cracked, "we were trying to protect you." "By stealing from me?" "By securing your future," Lyla cut in. "Do you know what happens to elderly people who run out of money? Who can't afford proper care? I'm 62, not 90, and I wouldn't need care if someone hadn't emptied my accounts." Silas flinched. The market was supposed to turn around. I had guarantees. Like the guarantee you made 43 years ago? To love and honor. The door creaked open. Finn slipped in, ignoring his mother's sharp intake of breath. "You're not supposed to be here," Lyla hissed. "Neither is Grandma," he said, climbing into the chair beside me. "She's supposed to be home." My lawyer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitfield is prepared to press charges unless certain conditions are met." "Charges?" Avery stood so quickly his chair toppled. "You'd send your own husband to jail? You'd send your own mother to a nursing home?" "We found a nice place," Lyla said. "Private rooms, activities, qualified staff. I have the brochures." I pulled them from my bag. "The ones you left in Silas's office. $1,500 a month, state subsidized. Quite a bargain compared to paying back what you stole." Silence fell like a curtain. Finn's small hand found mine under the table. "What do you want?" Silas finally asked. "The house stays in my name. You move out. Avery and Lyla repay every penny of my retirement fund they used for their down payment. And you," I looked at my husband of 43 years, "sign a confession detailing exactly what you did." "That would ruin him," Avery protested. "He ruined himself. I'm just making sure he can't ruin anyone else." Lila's laugh was bitter. "And you think this makes you the better person? Destroying your family for revenge?" "No," I said quietly. "I think this makes me a person, not a problem to be managed or an obstacle to be removed. If you do this," Silas's voice shook, "there's no coming back, no fixing things later. Things broke the moment you decided I was worth more to you locked away than by your side." Finn tugged my sleeve. "Does this mean I won't see you anymore?" "Of course you'll see her," Avery snapped. "Once she realizes how childish she's being. That's enough." My lawyer stood. "My client has made her terms clear. You have 24 hours to decide." As chairs scraped back and papers shuffled, Finn wrapped his arms around my waist. "I don't care what Mom and Dad say. You're not crazy." Lyla grabbed his shoulder. "We're leaving. Now." I watched them file out, my grandson fighting tears, my son avoiding my gaze, my husband looking suddenly old and small. Only Lyla paused in the doorway. "You'll regret this," she said softly. "When you're alone with nothing but your pride, you'll remember who really tried to take care of you." The door clicked shut behind them. In the sudden quiet, my lawyer gathered his papers, muttering about filing deadlines and court dates. But all I could think about was Finn's face, and how revenge felt nothing like victory. The 24 hours hadn't quite expired when Finn showed up at Marlene's door, out of breath and clutching his backpack. "I rode my bike," he said, pushing past me into the house. "Mom and Dad are fighting again. Grandpa's at our house too, and he's crying." My heart clenched. "Does anyone know you're here?" He shook his head, pulling something from his backpack, a manila envelope, wrinkled and stained with coffee. "Grandpa dropped this. I think it's important." Inside was Silas's signed confession, along with documents showing transfers of funds back to my accounts. But there was something else, medical records. Silas's medical records. "Stage 3 pancreatic cancer," I whispered. "Diagnosed 4 months ago." The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Avery's car in the driveway, Silas in the passenger seat. Lyla stood on the porch, arms crossed. "Finn," she called. "I know you're in there." I looked at my grandson, his face pale but determined. "It's okay," he said. "I'm not afraid anymore." When I opened the door, Lyla started to speak, but I held up the medical records. "Were you going to tell me?" She stepped back. "He made us promise not to. Get in here, all of you." Minutes later, We sat in Marlene's living room, the same players as yesterday's meeting, but with exhaustion replacing anger. Silas looked smaller somehow, diminished. "The first investment went bad," he said quietly. "I thought if I could just make it back before the cancer." His voice cracked. "Before I left you alone." "So, you decided to leave her alone in a nursing home instead?" Avery's voice was sharp. "Dad, I can't keep defending this." "I'm not asking you to." Silas pulled out more papers, property deeds, bank statements. "I've signed everything over to Cora. The house, what's left of the accounts, everything. Avery and Lyla's house too." Lyla stood abruptly. "You can't." "He can," I interrupted, "because it was never his to give you in the first place." Finn, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Is Grandpa going to die?" The room fell silent. Silas wiped his eyes. "Yes, buddy, but not right away." "Then why are you all fighting? Why can't we just—" He looked at each of us in turn. "Why can't we just be family for the time we have left?" I thought about revenge, about justice, about all the ways I'd imagined making them pay. Then I looked at my husband, this proud, foolish man who'd tried to secure my future by stealing it. "The house stays in my name," I said finally. "All of them. But Avery and Lyla can stay in theirs, with a proper rental agreement. And Silas." He met my eyes for the first time in days. "Yes, you'll move into the guest room at our house. We'll get hospice care when it's time. But no more secrets, no more schemes. Everything in the open." "Mom," Avery started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not doing this for him, or for any of you." I reached for Finn's hand. "I'm doing it because revenge doesn't heal anything, and we've all done enough damage." Lyla sank back into her chair. "What about the confession? The charges?" "I'm keeping them. Insurance against future betrayals." I looked at each of them in turn. Trust, once broken, has to be earned back. Slowly, carefully, if you're willing to try. Finn squeezed my hand. Across the room, Silas nodded, tears tracking down his face. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted Marlene's garden in shades of gold and shadow, like a reminder that even the darkest days eventually yield to light. Not an ending, perhaps, but a beginning of something new, something honest, something real. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen, arranging cookies on a plate while hospice adjusted Silas's medication in the next room. The doorbell rang, and Finn burst in, followed by Avery and Lyla, their step still cautious on my threshold. "I made honor roll." Finn waved his report card. "And I got picked for the science fair." "Of course you did." I hugged him close, breathing in the scent of autumn air, and boy, your project on solar energy was brilliant. Lyla cleared her throat. "We thought maybe, if you're not too busy, you could help him with the next one." The olive branch was small, but it was there, like the casseroles she'd started bringing over, or the way Avery now called every evening to check on his father. Baby steps toward something not quite forgiveness, but close enough. "I'd love to," I said. "But first, I have something to show all of you." I led them to my home office, once Silas's domain, now transformed. Where his investment papers had been, there were now college brochures. My laptop showed applications for business courses, and a half-finished business plan lay on the desk. "What is this?" Avery picked up a pamphlet for small business loans. "Remember that little bookshop downtown? The one going out of business?" I touched the business plan. "I'm buying it. The papers will be ready next week." "But," Lyla looked confused, "you've never run a business." "No, because 43 years ago, when I had the chance, I chose to support your father's dreams instead." I met their eyes. "It's time for my own." Finn examined the shop's photo. "Can I help? I could organize the kids section." "I'm counting on it." The hospice nurse appeared in the doorway. "He's asking for you, Mrs. Whitfield. All of you." Silas lay propped up in the hospital bed we'd installed in the guest room, his face gaunt but peaceful, his eyes fixed on the business plan in my hands. "You finally found the courage," he whispered. "I had it all along. I just needed to remember." He nodded. then looked at Avery and Lyla. The house is yours when it's time, but on your mother's terms. Always on her terms now. Dad, Avery started, but Silas shook his head. I spent years thinking I knew what was best for everyone, making choices that weren't mine to make. He reached for my hand. I forgot that love means supporting dreams, not burying them. Later, after they'd gone home, and the nurse had settled Silas for the night, I sat in my office planning tomorrow's bank meeting. Marlene had offered to help with the bookkeeping, and Finn was already designing bookmarks for the grand opening. My phone buzzed with a text from Lyla. Need help with a business plan? I know some people. Another olive branch. Another step forward. I touched the bare spot on my ring finger, thinking of the wedding band now tucked away in my jewelry box. Some bonds remain even after the symbols are gone, transformed but not destroyed. Like the way Silas now asks about the bookshop every morning, trying to make amends with what little time he has left. Or how Avery calls me Mom again, the word carrying new weight, new understanding. The last light of day filtered through my window, casting long shadows across the business plan. Tomorrow, I'd sign the papers that would make the bookshop mine. Next week, I'd start classes on business management. Small steps toward a dream 43 years delayed, but not defeated. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply becoming who you were always meant to be, while those who once sought to cage you learn to watch you fly.